Welcome to the tutorial on text pages in the archive. In this tutorial, we will go over the various parts of a text page so that when you are ready to change or add material, you'll know what belongs where and how the parts of an entry fit together. We'll also see how a text page is connected to other relevant pages, including some that are only for use by guest editors. The heart of a text page is the text. Typically a poem or a portion of one. It appears here. Note that it's in a typeface distinct from the rest of the content on the page. If an editor has confirmed that the text in the archive matches a version found in a source other than a musical score, such as a book or manuscript, a note listing the source should appear here. The highlighted portion here also shows that an editor confirmed the author's text. Note that the headline on a text page is not always the same as the title given by the original author. In some cases, the first line is used instead, or just the beginning of the first line, as we see here. There is a good reason for this. Although the author, Heine, titled his verse Wahrhaftig, not all of the settings we have as archive entries were given that same title by their composers. One uses the first line followed by Heine's title. One does use Heine's title, and another uses Lied followed by the first line. The rule for text page titles in the archive is this. If any one setting carries a title different from the poem's original title, and assuming we know that original title, then the page for that text will use the first line, rather than the author's title, as the headline. Going back to the content of the text itself, let's say you noticed an error, a misspelled word, or a missing punctuation mark, for example. Or maybe you have access to a different primary source with which you can confirm the text, and so give our users greater confidence in the archive's version. To suggest any changes, use the Modify This Text link. On this page, you can propose changes to many aspects of the archive entry for a text. The fields are pre-filled with the current information about the text. Otherwise, this page is identical to the page for adding a new text. There is a separate video tutorial on that topic, and there are written instructions at the bottom of the page. Back on the text page, under Authorship, we see the author's name and dates, the title of the poem, the book in which it was published, and the section in which it appears. We also see a link to a collection or group of poems titled Romanzen. If we follow that link, it takes us to the page for the group, where we find links to any texts in that group for which there are archive entries. In this case, we find all 20 of Heine's collection. Note that number 4, Der arme Peter, is itself a mini collection of 3 poems. Looking at our example text page again, below the headline, the language of the text is given. And immediately below that, but before the text, are links to any available translations of this text, identified by their 3-letter language codes. Links to singable translations are highlighted in this bronze color. Most translations in the archive were not written to be singable. Those links are blue. You can submit your own translation of the text using one of the links here. Adding translations is covered in a separate video. Let's take a quick look at the French translation. This copyright warning appears on pages with copyrighted material. You can dismiss it if you like by clicking the X in the upper right. The translation to French is displayed to the right of the original German text. A translation usually, as in this example, will have the same number of lines as the original. Information that relates to the translation appears in the column below it. Now back to our text. The last two lines of this poem are in square brackets followed by a footnote number. The brackets mean that the sung text, found in at least one setting, differs here from the original text. The footnote provides details. This footnote indicates that the Mendelssohn-Hensel setting of the poem replaces the two bracketed lines with these indented lines. That is, the composer substituted her own words to be sung here, and they appear in at least one edition of the score. Revisions of this sort are not uncommon, particularly in 19th century repertoire. This setting is listed here, next to the third bullet point. The green highlight here shows that the text of the setting has been checked by an editor, in this case one time. We can see from the red highlight accompanying details of the Hartmann setting that it has not yet been checked by an editor. Usually this means that we know a setting exists, but we haven't been able to check the score. This link indicates that the Hartmann setting of our example text is part of a collection by the composer. A collection of settings could be a song cycle, a group of unrelated works published under one opus number, or anything in between. The texts for this collection are displayed in the same order as the musical settings in the collection. We can find our example text at number 2 in the collection. Many times a composer will set a poem after it has been translated into another language. In this case, Denisov set to music a translation of our example text into Russian by Sorgenfrei. Let's take a look. Here we see the Russian translation. Note that the archive can display 3 styles of transliteration for a Cyrillic text. Here is the default style as an example. Scrolling down, we can see how this page differs from a typical translation page. In addition to the authorship and based on sections, there is also a musical setting listed, the Denisov setting. The entry for the setting shows that it too comes from a collection. This time, the collection is a song cycle. A couple of quick notes. The bold red punctuation in the text means that lines or stanzas in the original were omitted by the composer. And here in number 4, the green highlight means that the text shown here has been verified against a score, while the red highlight means that it has not been checked against the author's text that the setting is based on. Going back once again to our example text by Heine, after footnotes, authorship, and any known settings, comes a list of translations available in the archive. If there were other adaptations of the original text available, they would be shown here as well. We can see these 2 translations are in the same 2 languages that were linked at the top of the page earlier. In fact, these will take you to the same 2 translation pages. At the bottom of the text page, we have credits for the editors who contributed research on the text. And below this, links to edit each of the listed settings. Say we want to propose changes to the Mendelssohn-Hensel setting. Much as the Modify This Text page we visited at the beginning of the tutorial gave us options to modify the entry for Heine's poem, this page allows us to propose changes to a given setting. Please see the separate video on modifying a setting. Back on our example page one last time. When you are viewing a text page and you know of another setting of that text, you can follow this link to add it. And please do. Thank you once again for offering your help as a guest editor. And thank you for watching to the end of this tutorial.